All right, we've done an initial inquiry development poster and we've identified one clear topic that we're really passionate about and we want to spend the year studying. But we haven't necessarily taken a look at what's happening in that particular field. So it's time to start an annotated bibliography. Let's find out what other researchers are doing in terms of participating in a larger conversation about this particular topic. The reason this is necessary is, one, to find out, is there enough academic research around the subject that we can build our entire project about it and to complete the literature review component of the paper. But also, it might be, as we start to look through our initial search of academic research on the subject, we might be inspired to select a method that is more prevalently used on this particular subject. Or we might find a revision to our research questions. We try to find that gap that hasn't been filled yet in the research. There's no expectation that at this point we have a final research question. We just need to have a topic that we're interested in. And then by creating an annotated bibliography, it introduces us to that conversation, but it also helps us to categorize the information that created the foundation of our understanding that will later show up in our academic paper. How do we get started with it? It's very simple. We go back to our inquiry development poster that we created previously. And if you remember, on the far right side of your poster, you started to identify search terms around your subject. So we're going to take that poster out and we're going to write out our list of search terms or just have it out in front of us. And we are going to start using those search terms to find out what academic work has been done on the subject. So we need our poster and we need our search terms, and then we're going to need access to the digital portfolio. Step 2 is, once we're logged into digital portfolio and we have access to the EBSCO database, or that we have access to Google Scholar, we're going to start searching for papers. And there's some very simple ways to save some time here to find out whether or not the paper that we're looking at is directly related to our subject or if it's going to be helpful. The first thing that we're going to do is use our search terms wisely. We're going to set some limits in terms on the range of information we want. If we're doing the sciences, we want something that is far more current and more directly relevant to our research. But if we're studying history, we might want to set a particular period. If you don't know how to set those search terms, you just need to let me know. On EBSCO, we want to select the box that says restrict to PDF versions. That way we have downloadable files at all times. And then we're going to start looking and opening up papers. And the first thing that we want to do is, if there's an abstract, we just want to scan the abstract. And from there, we should be able to determine if the paper is relevant to our inquiry and if it's interesting enough that we want to continue pursuing it. If it's in a format where they don't have an abstract, then we're simply going to look through the introduction. That way I'm only reading 1, maybe 2 pages of an academic paper and not a full 60 to 85 page paper. By making this one little switch and just focusing on those parts of the paper, we can sift through this information a lot faster. I recommend that if you have something identified as being relevant, then you read the article. But if you don't believe it's relevant within the first page and a half or within the abstract, then chances are it's probably not relevant and we can move on and find a different source. Now, if you find something that you like, that you want to investigate further later, you don't have to read the whole paper right now, but you do want to save that PDF version of the paper to a folder in your Google Drive. Yes, I know there's a Save tab on EBSCO, but when you click on that, sometimes if you're not logged into EBSCO separately, it doesn't save. By downloading the PDF and saving it to a separate folder in your drive, you guarantee that you will always have access to that paper. A lot of us in seminar last year, we had the circumstance where we found great information, we really liked it, the bell rang, we closed the tabs, and then the next day we had to spend another 10 to 15 minutes trying to find that source all over again. So what I recommend is you go into Google Drive, you create a research folder if you haven't done so already, and then within there you create a folder labeled resources, and that's where you put any materials that may help your inquiry in terms of the works produced by other people. So you don't have to read all of the articles today, but if you have something that you think is worth reading later, then you're going to save that PDF version of the paper to a folder in Google Drive. Once you have a series of sources that you think are relevant, and for this particular assignment, we're going to try and limit ourselves to no less than 4 entries and no more than 7. We don't want to go so far overboard here that we get overwhelmed this early in the process. So what we're then going to do is we're going to create an entry for each of these articles in our annotated bibliography. The handout is posted to Google Classroom, and you're going to take a look at the instructions of what I want in each one of the entries. But over here on the left-hand side, I've given you a visual of what it is that you need to talk about for each entry in the annotated bibliography. You will need the proper citation, and that citation is discipline specific based on the inquiry in which you're doing. That way, when you just cut and paste that later into your academic paper, it's always in the same format. We're going to have a brief summary of the source, and I want to emphasize brief summary of the source. We're going to take a look at the credibility. Now remember, credibility is not about whether or not it's an academic peer-reviewed journal. Chances are it is. We want to look at the credentials of the authors involved. We want to look at the credentials of the publication or the publisher of that particular paper. What do we know about them? Is this a foundational text? Have they worked in the field for 30 or 40 years? Or is this the contribution of a grad student? All of those things work to let us know where this paper ranks relative to the other papers that will show up in our academic paper. And then relevance to inquiry. You need to give me a description of why this source needs to be involved. How does it communicate with the other papers in your annotated bibliography? How is it connected? Does it build on the work of somebody? Does it contradict the work of somebody? Is it parallel to the work of someone else? Does it identify an entirely different subset of the inquiry that we need to be aware of? In there, you want to make sure that you're adding in, is it a foundational text, meaning this is something that everything else will be built on, or is it an additional text, meaning that it is going to add to or contribute to the work of other papers that you're including in your inquiry? Also, before you begin, I want you to check the scoring rubric I provided on the handout and then revise the work if needed. All right? Something to keep in mind as you're going through this process. The effort you put into this assignment now will show up on your work in April. More effort now means less effort then. If you do a bad job with your first annotated bibliography, you're going to have a weak literature review. And if you have a weak literature review, chances are you're going to have a weak academic paper. The more effort we put into doing this correctly now, the easier it's going to be to put that paper together in April so that we get the score that we want.